Picture this, a packed Las Vegas showroom, 5,000 faces bathed in spotlight glow. Dean Martin mid-song, voice wrapping around every note like silk. Then, without warning, he goes silent. The melody dies in his throat. His eyes drift toward the darkness, off stage. Color drains from his face like water from a broken glass. The microphone slips from his fingers. He walks away. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. The crowd thinks it's choreographed, a bit, part of the act. But behind those velvet curtains, Dean Martin's universe has just imploded. His boy, Dean Paul, is gone. And what unfolds over the next 2 days will expose a dimension of Dean Martin the public never witnessed. A father so completely shattered that he'll spend the rest of his life as a walking wound that never heals. To grasp the magnitude of what happened that night, you need to understand who Dean Paul Martin actually was. This wasn't just some celebrity offspring riding his father's coattails. Dean Paul, nicknamed Dino by his father, and everyone who mattered, represented everything Dean Martin hoped to leave behind in this world. Born November 17, 1951, Dino grew up surrounded by Hollywood royalty. Most kids in that position buckle under the pressure. They become cautionary tales. But not Dino. He dominated. Tennis became his first love, and he excelled at championship levels. Music called to him too, so he formed Dino, Desi and Billy with Desi Arnaz Jr. and Billy Hinchy, creating pop-rock hits that stood on their own merit. Hollywood came knocking with film and television opportunities that he handled with natural ease. But here's what truly defined him. Captain Dean Paul Martin of the California Air National Guard, commanding F-4 Phantom fighter jets through hostile skies, Dino wasn't just living up to his father's name, he was transcending it. Talented without arrogance, accomplished without ego, brave in ways that mattered. Everyone who crossed his path left thinking the same thing: that kid's special. Dean Martin built an empire on never cracking, the unshakable cool. The guy who let everything roll off his back like water off wax. But mention his son, and that fortress crumbled. People close to the family knew the truth that couldn't be hidden. Dino wasn't just Dean's favorite child. That description feels too simple. They existed as best friends who happened to share blood. Their connection operated on a frequency nobody else could access. Early 1987 found Dean Martin at 69 years old. His performing schedule had slowed to occasional appearances, mostly Vegas and Atlantic City engagements, where the money remained good and the audiences still remembered when he ruled the world. The performances carried a different weight now. Dean's body was betraying him. Decades of cigarettes had transformed his lungs into damaged machinery struggling for each breath. That voice, once liquid gold, now carried gravel and rasp. But the charm persisted. That indefinable presence that made strangers fall helplessly in love remained intact. Saturday, March 21, 1987. Dean was booked at Bally's Casino in Las Vegas. The showroom was sold out. 5,000 people eager to witness the king of cool work his magic. Dean arrived around 7 that evening. Earlier than his usual routine, his road manager, Eddie Marsh, noticed something unusual immediately. Dean seemed different, lighter somehow. Eddie would spend years remembering that night, replaying every detail. Normally, before showtime, Dean was withdrawn, going through pre-show motions mechanically. Eddie recalled, but that night felt different. He cracked jokes with the stagehands. He asked about their kids, their lives. It was like someone had turned back the clock to the old Dean, the one from before the weight of the world settled on his shoulders. Eddie didn't know about the phone call that morning. Dino had reached out from March Air Force Base, where he was stationed. Nothing profound, just ordinary conversation between father and son. Love expressed casually because they had unlimited tomorrows. Pride exchanged because it was always there between them. Neither man sensed anything final about those words. Neither suspected those would be the last words they'd ever share. 9 o'clock arrived. Dean Martin stepped into the spotlight to a standing ovation. The tuxedo fit perfectly. Every inch the legend. The band launched into the opening number, and Dean slipped into that effortless performance mode he'd perfected over 40 years. The audience was electric. That's a more. Brought them to their feet. Ain't That a Kick in the Head had them singing along. Memories Are Made of This turned the showroom into a time machine back to Vegas's golden era. For 90 glorious minutes, it felt like nothing had changed. Around 9:35, Dean began Everybody Loves Somebody, his signature, the song that knocked the Beatles from #1 back in 1964. The audience swayed, couples held each other close. Dean's voice, rough but powerful, filled every corner of that massive room. Then something shifted. Eddie Marsh materialized in the stage left wings, phone clutched in his white-knuckled hand. His face looked like he'd seen death itself. He was attempting to signal Dean without causing a scene. A subtle wave, then more urgent, more desperate. Dean caught it mid-verse. The singing stopped. The band, confused, continued for several bars before the music died in awkward fragments. The audience, assuming this was planned, waited with anticipation. Dean locked eyes with Eddie. Everyone who witnessed that moment would later describe the same thing. Watching something fundamental change in Dean's face. "Something's wrong," Dean said into the microphone. His voice carried no panic, just emptiness. "Excuse me, folks." He placed the microphone on the piano with careful precision and walked off stage. The audience applauded politely, assuming an intermission. The band filled the silence with instrumental music, but behind those curtains, hell had arrived. Eddie Marsh stood frozen in the wings, tears carving paths down his face. When Dean reached him, Eddie's voice had abandoned him completely. He simply handed over the phone. On the other end, a colonel from the California Air National Guard. "Mr. Martin, I'm calling about your son, Captain Dean Paul Martin." Dean's hands began trembling uncontrollably. "What happened?" The colonel's voice was steady, professional, trained for delivering nightmares. "Sir, I regret to inform you that your son's aircraft crashed during a training exercise this afternoon at approximately 1600 hours. The plane went down in the San Bernardino Mountains. There were no survivors." The phone hit the floor. Dean Martin didn't scream, didn't collapse, didn't rage. He simply stood there, transformed into a statue, staring at nothing and everything simultaneously. Eddie reached out to steady him. Dean shoved the hand away roughly. He walked toward his dressing room, each step mechanical, robotic, like someone had programmed basic movement into a mannequin. The stage manager came sprinting. "Dean, what's going on? Do we cancel?" Dean turned slowly, looked at the man with dead eyes. "My son is dead." 4 words. That's all it took to change everything. The stage manager immediately went public, announced an emergency, show canceled, refunds available. The audience filtered out confused, concerned, whispering speculation. Most wouldn't learn the truth until morning newspapers delivered the devastating headline. In his dressing room, Dean Martin sat on a leather couch, tuxedo still perfect, hands resting in his lap. Eddie stood guard at the door, paralyzed by inadequacy. "What do you say? What do you do when a man's world ends?" Dean wasn't crying, wasn't speaking, just staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Finally, after an eternity compressed into minutes, Dean spoke. "He called me this morning, told me he loved me." Eddie nodded, tears flowing freely. "He did, Dean. He loved you more than anything." Dean's voice came from somewhere far away. He was flying. He loved flying. Said it made him feel free. Dean stood abruptly. "I need to go home. I need to tell Jean." Jean Martin, Dean's ex-wife and Dino's mother. They'd divorced in 1973, but remained bonded by their children, by history, by shared love that transcended failed marriage. Eddie arranged transportation to Jean's Beverly Hills home. The drive existed in complete silence. Dean occupied the back seat, staring through tinted windows at Las Vegas lights bleeding past. Eddie sat beside him, drowning in words that wouldn't come. When they arrived, Jean was already in the doorway. Someone had warned her. Her face was destroyed by tears, swollen and red. Dean exited the vehicle and walked toward her with that same mechanical gait. When he reached her, Dean Martin collapsed into her arms, and finally he broke. Deep, wrenching sobs torn from somewhere primitive and raw, a place of agony so profound that witnesses would carry that sound in their nightmares forever. Jean held him, and they cried together for the son who would never come home. March 22nd, 1987. Morning arrived without mercy. The news exploded everywhere. Dean Paul Martin, son of Dean Martin, killed in plane crash. Media descended like predators, sensing blood. Reporters established camps outside family homes. Camera flashes strobed constantly. Microphones thrust at anyone who emerged. The world demanded to know how Dean Martin was handling tragedy. But Dean wasn't handling anything. He was drowning in slow motion. The crash details emerged gradually, each one more devastating than the last. Dean Paul had been piloting an F-4 Phantom II on routine training maneuvers over the San Bernardino Mountains. Weather conditions were brutal. Heavy cloud cover, visibility nearly zero. Approximately 4 p.m., his plane vanished from radar. Search and rescue teams deployed immediately, but the terrain fought them viciously. 3 days passed before they located the wreckage. When they did, it confirmed everyone's worst fears. Dean Paul Martin and his weapons systems officer, Captain Ramon Ortiz, hadn't survived. The plane had impacted the mountain at full speed. There was nothing recoverable, nothing left to bring home except memories. March 26, 1987. The memorial service at Los Angeles National Cemetery. Military funeral with full honors. Hundreds attended. Family, friends, fellow pilots, celebrities, strangers who'd never met Dino, but felt the loss anyway. Dean sat front row wearing sunglasses that couldn't hide his tears. When the honor guard presented the folded American flag, Dean clutched it to his chest and sobbed openly. This wasn't the cool, untouchable Dean Martin from television screens. This was a father burying his child. It was unbearable to witness. Frank Sinatra, Dean's closest friend and Rat Pack brother, delivered the eulogy. His voice cracked and broke as he spoke about Dean Paul's bravery, his talent, his fundamental kindness. Then Frank looked directly at Dean and said, "Dino, I know words are useless right now, but please know we all loved your boy, and we love you." Dean didn't respond, didn't acknowledge, just sat there crushing that flag against his chest, staring at the casket that held his son's remains. After the funeral, Dean Martin vanished from public existence, canceled every upcoming performance, stopped answering phones, rarely left his house. Friends who managed to visit described a ghost. Shirley MacLaine, one of Dean's oldest friends, visited a few weeks later. Walking into his house felt like entering a tomb, she remembered. Every curtain drawn, lights off. Dean sitting in complete darkness, watching old videos of Dino playing tennis as a kid. He looked at me and said, "I can't do this anymore, Shirley. I can't exist in a world where my son doesn't." His daughter Dina Martin tried desperately to rescue her father from drowning. Daily visits, bringing food he wouldn't eat, pleading with him to step outside, breathe fresh air, rejoin the living. But Dean was unreachable. It was like he died with Dino, Dina said. Dad's body was still physically present, but his soul had left. I was talking to an empty shell. The months and years that followed watched Dean Martin deteriorate rapidly. Emphysema from decades of smoking ravaged his lungs. Weight melted away. He stopped caring about appearance. The man who'd epitomized effortless cool now looked frail, broken, defeated. 1988 brought a brief attempt at resurrection. Dean agreed to a reunion tour with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. billed as the ultimate event. The Rat Pack together again, but after just a handful of shows, Dean walked away mid-tour. He told Frank, "I can't do it anymore. Every time I'm on that stage, all I see is Dino. I think about how he should be here, watching, proud. I can't keep pretending I'm okay when everything insane is dead." Frank understood immediately, didn't argue, didn't try convincing him to reconsider, just embraced his friend and whispered, "I love you, pal." Dean Martin spent his remaining years in isolation, watching old films, listening to music from better times, drinking to numb the pain, and thinking constantly about his son. Christmas morning, December 25, 1995. Dean Martin died at his Beverly Hills home. 78 years old, official cause. Acute respiratory failure, but everyone who truly knew him understood the real truth. Dean Martin died of a broken heart that had been breaking for 8 years straight. At Dean's funeral, Dina Martin stood at the podium with tears streaming. My father never recovered from losing Dino. He tried. God knows he tried. But the pain was insurmountable. For 8 years, he carried that grief like a mountain on his shoulders, every single day, and now, finally, he's with his son again. I believe with everything I am that they're together now, and Dad is finally at peace. The story of Dean Martin and Dean Paul transcends celebrity tragedy. It reminds us that grief recognizes no boundaries, doesn't care about fame or fortune or legendary status. When you lose a child, the pain is universal, absolute, inescapable. Dean Martin spent 40 years crafting an image of effortless cool, making everything look easy, singing, acting, performing, life itself. But beneath that carefully constructed facade lived a man who loved with terrifying intensity, and when he lost his son, the world witnessed the real Dean Martin, not the performer, not the legend, just a father destroyed by losing his child. There's a recording from that night, March 21st, 1987, not widely circulated, but it exists. You can hear Dean singing "Everybody Loves Somebody," voice smooth and confident. Then you hear him stop, the band trailing off in confusion. The audience is puzzled, murmuring, and if you listen carefully enough, you can hear the exact moment Dean Martin's life changed forever. That recording haunts not because of what it contains, but because of what it represents. The sound of a father's world ending in real time. The sound of a man realizing that nothing protects you from the worst pain imaginable. Not fame, not fortune, not talent, not love itself. Dean Martin once said, "I give up everything I have to get my son back, all of it. The money, the fame, the career, every record, every film. I'd trade it all for one more day with Dino, just one more day." But he never got that day. None of us do when we lose someone, and that's the cruelest truth of all.